The Galactic Council's pristine white chambers had never witnessed such silence. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the circular hall, her black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast against the gleaming surfaces that surrounded her. 47 species represented in the council, and not one of them would meet her eyes. The Zephyrians, with their crystalline bodies that chimed softly when they moved, had gone completely still. The Mokari delegation, usually animated with their flowing tentacles and bioluminescent displays, had dimmed to almost complete darkness. Even the proud hegemony representatives, the Veilthak with their towering frames and metallic skin, seemed to shrink in their seats. High Counselor Thexani of the Dominion Alliance finally broke the oppressive quiet. His voice carried the usual, condescending tone that had become so familiar to human ears over the past decade. The Council has reviewed your species' request for military intervention regarding the Kepler 442 incident. He paused, his four eyes scanning a holographic display with theatrical precision. Your request is denied. Elena felt her jaw tighten, but her voice remained steady. Denied? 300,000 human colonists were slaughtered, civilians including children. The evidence clearly shows hegemony warships conducted orbital bombardment on non-military targets. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the Veilthak delegation. General Karthek, their military representative, leaned forward with a metallic scraping sound. The hegemony acted within established protocols. The human colony was warned to evacuate territory that rightfully belonged to our sphere of influence. Rightfully belonged? Elena's composure cracked slightly. The colony ship aspiration established settlement rights under Article 12 of the Galactic Settlement Accords. Rights that this very council approved 15 years ago. High Counselor. Thexani's mandibles clicked in what passed for a dismissive gesture among his species. The accords were written when your species was considered a potential asset to galactic civilization. Recent events have demonstrated that humans remain fundamentally unsuited for membership in civilized society. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She had heard variations of this speech countless times, but never so blatantly stated in official chambers. Unsuited? We've contributed more technological innovations to the Council database than any species in the past century. Human engineers designed the quantum communication networks that allow this Council to function across light years. Human medical researchers developed treatments that have saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds. Deathworld savagery. The phrase came from Counselor Veshka of the Serene Coalition, her melodic voice somehow making the words even more cutting. Your species cannot overcome its violent nature. The data is conclusive. Humans have been involved in 73% of all documented conflicts since joining the galactic community. Elena's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Because we're the ones who respond when others are attacked. When the Zephyrian trade routes were threatened by pirates, who cleared them? When the Mokari colonies faced extinction from the plague outbreak, who sent aid? When the collective's slave raids terrorized the outer systems, who stopped them? Violence is never the answer, Counselor Veshka replied serenely. There are always diplomatic solutions for those civilized enough to pursue them. Diplomatic solutions. Elena repeated the words slowly, tasting the bitter irony. Like the diplomatic solution that left 300,000 humans dead while this council debated proper procedures for 18 months? General Karthek's laugh was like grinding metal. Your species chose to settle on a death world. Terra with its poisonous atmosphere, crushing gravity, and radioactive star. Only savages would evolve in such conditions. The Kepler colony was simply natural selection correcting an error. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it felt different. Elena could sense something shifting in the political currents that flowed through the council. The other species weren't just remaining neutral anymore. They were actively supporting the hegemony's position. She looked around the chamber one more time, taking in faces that had once seemed alien but familiar, beings she had worked with, shared meals with, considered colleagues if not friends. Now she saw only cold calculation in their expressions. I see. Elena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the perfect acoustics of the chamber, every word carried clearly. For 10 years, humanity has followed every protocol, honored every treaty, contributed to every cause. We've bled and died for species that view us as nothing more than useful animals. We've played by rules designed to keep us in our place." She took a step toward the central podium, and several delegates visibly recoiled. "The Terran Federation has spent a decade trying to prove we belong in your civilized galaxy. We've swallowed insults, accepted discrimination, and turned the other cheek when attacked because we believed in the ideals this council claimed to represent." Elena reached into her jacket and withdrew a data pad. The motion caused several security officers to tense, but she simply placed it on the podium with a soft click that somehow seemed to echo like thunder. "This contains the formal withdrawal of Earth and all human colonies from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. All treaties, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts are hereby terminated." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Since this council has made it clear that humans are not welcome in civilized space, we'll stop pretending to be civilized." High Counselor Thexani's mandibles spread wide in alarm. "You cannot simply withdraw. There are procedures, protocols." "Protocols?" Elena's laugh was sharp and bitter. "The same protocols that just declared the massacre of 300,000 civilians to be within established guidelines. The same protocols that allow member species to be slaughtered while bureaucrats debate semantics." She turned to address the chamber directly, her voice carrying a weight that made the very air seem heavy. "You want to know what a death world produces? You want to see what savages look like when they stop pretending to be tame?" Elena began walking toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the absolute silence. At the threshold, she paused and looked back one final time. "The Terran Federation formally declares that any attack on human civilians will be considered an act of war. Not an incident to be debated, not a misunderstanding to be negotiated. War." She met General Karthek's four eyes directly. "The hegemony has 48 hours to surrender the officers responsible for the Kepler massacre for trial. After that, we stop asking nicely." The chamber doors sealed behind her with a soft hiss, leaving 47 species in stunned silence. None of them truly understood what they had just unleashed. They would learn soon enough that Deathworlders, once roused to anger, did not make war the way civilized species did. They made war the way apex predators hunted prey. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TFS Retribution, watching the holographic display that showed the positions of every human ship in known space. The data streams flowing across her tactical screens told a story that would have been impossible just weeks ago. In 72 hours since Ambassador Vasquez's declaration, the entire human fleet had moved with a coordination that amazed even their own strategists. "Admiral, final confirmation from the Outer Rim colonies," reported Captain Martinez from the communications station. "All civilian populations have been evacuated to secure facilities. Total compliance with Emergency Protocol 7. Sarah nodded grimly. Emergency Protocol 7 was something no one had ever wanted to use. It meant that humanity was preparing for total war, and every human civilian in space was now a potential target. The evacuation of 3 million colonists across 47 worlds had been completed in less than 3 days. Only humans could have managed such a feat. "What's our fleet status?" Sarah asked. 837 combat vessels operational and ready," answered Commander Okafor from the tactical station. "That includes everything from patrol boats to the new Phoenix-class dreadnoughts. All ships have been retrofitted with the classified weapon systems." Sarah allowed herself a thin smile. The classified weapon systems were humanity's secret advantage. While the galactic community had focused on energy weapons and shields, human engineers had quietly continued developing kinetic weapons, railguns, mass drivers, and missile systems that could punch through any known defense. "Admiral, incoming transmission from General Karthek of the Hegemony," announced the communications officer. "Put him through." The holographic display shifted to show the imposing figure of the Valthak general. His metallic skin gleamed under artificial lighting, and his four eyes held the same arrogant expression that had become so familiar during diplomatic meetings. "Admiral Chen," Karthek's voice carried its usual condescending tone. "I trust you're calling to discuss the terms of human surrender. The 48-hour deadline your ambassador mentioned was quite amusing, but surely you realize that—" "The deadline expired 6 hours ago," Sarah interrupted, her voice cold as vacuum. You had your chance to surrender the war criminals responsible for Kepler 442. Instead, your government issued a statement calling human civilians acceptable casualties in territorial disputes. General Karthek's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Your species has delusions of military significance. The hegemony commands over 3,000 vessels. Our technology is centuries ahead of your primitive weapons. This war you've declared will last exactly as long as it takes our ships to reach Terra. 3,000 vessels, Sarah repeated thoughtfully. Impressive numbers. Tell me, General, how many of those ships are currently operational? Something flickered in Karthek's expression. What do you mean? 6 hours ago, the TFS Phantom Strike conducted reconnaissance in the Vailthak home system. Imagine our surprise to discover that your centuries-ahead technology includes absolutely no defense against cloaked ships. Sarah's smile grew wider. We counted exactly 412 vessels in your core fleet. The rest are scattered across your territory, protecting colonies and trade routes. Impossible. Cloaking technology doesn't exist. The physics are impossible for species that evolved in stable environments, Sarah interrupted again. But humans come from a world where survival meant adapting to conditions others would consider lethal. We learned to hide from predators long before we learned to hunt them. The display behind Sarah shifted to show tactical data from multiple star systems. Red dots marked hegemony positions, while blue indicators showed human fleet movements. Karthek's 4 eyes widened as he processed what he was seeing. This is all fabricated data, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Sarah gestured to Commander Okafor, who activated another display. These are real-time feeds from 17 different hegemony systems. Notice anything interesting about your defensive positions? The screens showed hegemony ships in various states of distress. Some were adrift with their engines dark. Others were venting atmosphere from hull breaches. A few were broadcasting distress signals. We didn't fire a single shot, Sarah explained calmly. Turns out that when you've spent centuries relying on energy weapons, you tend to neglect basic armor plating. Human ships carry mining charges for asteroid operations. Mining charges that, with minor modifications, make excellent magnetic mines. General Karthek was now fully upright in his command chair, his metallic skin taking on a darker hue that Sarah recognized as a stress response. This is not how civilized warfare is conducted. There are protocols, agreed-upon methods. Civilized warfare? Sarah's laugh was harsh. There's nothing civilized about murdering 300,000 civilians. You want to see how Deathworlders fight a war? You're about to get a comprehensive education. She nodded to Captain Martinez, who opened a channel to the entire human fleet. All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. Operation Payback is now active. You know your targets. The tactical display exploded into motion as 800 human ships simultaneously engaged their drives. They moved in patterns that no galactic strategist would have predicted, following flight paths that seemed to ignore conventional tactical doctrine entirely. What you're seeing, Sarah explained to the increasingly agitated hegemony general, is the result of studying every military conflict in human history. We've learned from Sun Tzu, Napoleon, Patton, and 1,000 other strategists. But more importantly, we've learned from predators. Wolves, sharks, raptors. We know how to hunt in packs. The display showed human ships converging on hegemony positions from multiple vectors. Instead of the standard formation attacks favored by galactic militaries, they moved like schools of fish or flocks of birds, constantly shifting and adapting. This is madness, Karthek said. Your ships are operating without any centralized command structure. How do you coordinate? We don't, Sarah replied simply. Each ship commander knows the mission and adapts to circumstances. It's called initiative, General. Another thing you learn when you evolve on a world that's constantly trying to kill you. The first reports began coming in from the engagement zones. Human ships were tearing through hegemony formations with brutal efficiency. The energy weapons that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia were proving inadequate against armor designed to withstand asteroid impacts and solar radiation. Your shields are impressive, Sarah admitted as she watched the tactical data update, but they're designed to stop energy weapons. Solid projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed tend to punch right through them. General Karthek was now standing, his forearms gesticulating wildly. This is barbaric. You're using kinetic weapons in space combat. The debris fields will make entire systems uninhabitable. Should have thought of that before you started a war, Sarah replied coldly. But don't worry, General. This is just the opening move. We're not trying to destroy your fleet completely. That would be wasteful. Then what? We're crippling it, Sarah explained. Every ship we hit is disabled, not destroyed. Their crews are alive but stranded. And here's the interesting part. Our cloaked ships are now mining every hyperspace jump point in hegemony territory. Your reinforcements aren't coming. The color drained from Karthek's metallic features as the full scope of human strategy became clear. You're cutting off our supply lines. Supply lines, communications, everything. In approximately 16 hours, every hegemony military installation will be isolated and surrounded by human forces they can't detect until it's too late. Sarah leaned forward slightly. This is what happens when you underestimate a species that survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and asteroid impacts. We're very good at siege warfare. The transmission from General Karthek cut out abruptly as his flagship's communications array was destroyed by a precisely placed magnetic mine. Sarah watched the tactical display for a moment longer, then turned to address her bridge crew. Phase 1 complete. All stations prepare for Phase 2. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you make humans angry. High Counselor Thexani's emergency chamber buzzed with panicked voices from across the galaxy. Representatives who had remained smugly silent during humanity's withdrawal were now demanding immediate action as reports flooded in from every corner of hegemony. Space. 17 military installations have gone dark in the past 4 hours, reported Counselor Veshka. Her usually melodic voice strained with tension. The Velthak are claiming their entire Outer Rim fleet has been neutralized without a single human casualty. Impossible, declared Ambassador Zexhai of the Crystal Dominion. Humans lack the technology for such coordinated strikes. Their ships are primitive, their weapons crude. Their weapons just punch through 6 layers of hegemony shielding, interrupted General Mordak of the Makari Defense Force, his bioluminescent patches flashing in agitated patterns. Whatever we thought we knew about human military capabilities, we were wrong. Thexani studied the tactical reports streaming across his displays. The data painted a picture that challenged everything the galactic community believed about warfare. Human ships were operating in ways that defied conventional strategic doctrine, appearing and disappearing like ghosts, striking with surgical precision before vanishing again. How are they coordinating these attacks? He wondered aloud. Our intelligence indicates they have no quantum entanglement communication network, no centralized command structure capable of. Maybe that's exactly why they're succeeding, said a quiet voice from the back of the chamber. All heads turned to Ambassador Kithara of the Observer caste, one of the few species that rarely spoke during council sessions. The observers were known for their analytical minds and their tendency to study conflicts rather than participate in them. Explain, Thexani demanded. Kithara moved to the central display, her elongated fingers dancing over the controls to bring up a tactical analysis. Every galactic military operates on the principle of centralized command and control. Orders flow down from command vessels to individual ships. It's efficient, predictable, and fundamentally flawed when facing an enemy that doesn't follow the same model. The display showed human fleet movements over the past 6 hours. Instead of the rigid formations and predictable patterns used by galactic militaries, human ships moved in complex, ever-shifting configurations that seemed almost organic. Look at this, Kithara continued, highlighting specific engagements. Human ships operate like pack hunters. Each unit is capable of independent decision-making, but they coordinate their efforts instinctively. When one ship identifies a target, others converge without waiting for orders. When threatened, they scatter and regroup in patterns that appear random but are actually highly sophisticated. Pack hunters, General Mordak repeated slowly. You're suggesting they're applying predator tactics to space warfare? Not applying, Kithara corrected. Humans are predators. We've all read the biological surveys. Binocular vision, sharp teeth, aggressive territorial behavior. Terra produced a species of apex predators, and we invited them into our civilized galaxy expecting them to behave like prey animals. Thexani felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. The hegemony assured us that human military capabilities were negligible. Primitive kinetic weapons, limited ship production, no significant technological advantages. The hegemony was measuring humans by galactic standards, Cathara replied. But humans don't follow galactic standards. They follow Deathworld standards. Consider this. Every other species in the galaxy evolved in stable environments with predictable challenges. We developed technology to overcome obstacles. Humans developed technology to kill things that were trying to kill them. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. On the display, more reports were arriving. Hegemony supply convoys destroyed. Communication relays sabotaged. Military installations reporting complete communications blackouts. Admiral Chen is requesting a direct channel to the Council, announced the communications technician. Put her through, Thexani ordered. The central display shifted to show the bridge of a human warship. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the center, her expression calm and professional despite the chaos her forces were unleashing across multiple star systems. High Counselor Thexani, she greeted formally. I trust you're receiving regular updates on current military operations? Admiral. Thexani's voice carried a tremor he couldn't quite suppress. The Council demands an immediate cessation of hostilities. This unprovoked aggression against a member species. Unprovoked? Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. 300,000 dead civilians would disagree with that assessment. But let's discuss terms. Terms? Counselor Veshka interjected. You're in no position to dictate terms. The combined fleets of the Galactic Council are currently being catalogued by our reconnaissance vessels, Sarah interrupted smoothly. We know the exact position, composition, and defensive capabilities of every military asset you possess. We also know their weaknesses. She gestured, and the display behind her showed detailed schematics of ships from dozens of different species. The level of analysis was staggering, down to individual weapon systems and structural vulnerabilities. How did you obtain this intelligence? General Mordak demanded. Humans are very good at gathering information, Sarah replied. We've been watching, learning, and planning for exactly this scenario since we joined the galactic community. Every diplomatic meeting, every joint exercise, every cultural exchange was an opportunity to study your capabilities. Thexani realized with growing horror that humanity had been preparing for war from the moment they achieved faster-than-light travel. What do you want? Justice, Sarah said simply. The officers responsible for the Kepler massacre will be turned over to human authorities for trial. The hegemony will pay reparations to the families of the victims, and most importantly, the Galactic Council will formally acknowledge that attacks on human civilians constitute acts of war, not territorial disputes. And if we refuse? Thexani asked. Sarah's smile was sharp and predatory. Then you'll discover why humans are the only species that developed the concept of total war. We don't fight to win territory or resources. We fight to completely eliminate threats to our survival. The display behind her shifted to show live feeds from hegemony space. Human ships were methodically dismantling military installations, communication networks, and supply depots. But more disturbing were the reports of human ground forces appearing on hegemony worlds, moving through their cities like ghosts, marking targets with an efficiency that spoke of months of preparation. You're conducting ground operations? Counselor Veshka asked in horror. Reconnaissance and target marking, Sarah corrected. But yes, human special forces teams have been inserted onto 17 hegemony worlds. They're cataloging military assets, government installations, and strategic infrastructure. If this conflict escalates, we'll know exactly what to hit and how to hit it. Ambassador Cathara stepped forward, her analytical mind processing the implications. You're not just fighting a war. You're demonstrating capability, showing the entire galaxy that human military doctrine is fundamentally different from anything we've encountered. Very perceptive, Sarah acknowledged. This isn't about the hegemony anymore. This is about establishing new rules for how the galaxy treats humanity. We're done being the species that gets blamed for every conflict while being excluded from every decision. What you're describing is terrorism, General Mordak accused. Sarah's expression hardened. What we're describing is consequences. For 10 years, humanity played by galactic rules. We accepted insults, discrimination, and outright hostility because we believed in the ideals of peaceful coexistence. But when those same rules were used to justify the massacre of our civilians, we decided to stop playing by rules designed to keep us powerless. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You want to know what separates humans from every other species in this galaxy? We don't just adapt to hostile environments. We transform hostile environments into hunting grounds, and right now the entire galaxy has become our hunting ground. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Outside, the reports continued to flood in. Hegemony ships disabled or destroyed, military installations going dark, supply lines severed. Thexani realized that they weren't just witnessing a military conflict. They were witnessing the emergence of a new apex predator in galactic politics, and like all prey species faced with a new predator, they had two choices: adapt or become extinct. The hegemony homeworld of Valthak Prime had never experienced fear like this. General Karthek stood in the Planetary Defense Center, watching tactical displays that told a story of systematic dismantlement. In 48 hours, the mighty hegemony fleet had been reduced to scattered, isolated units hiding in asteroid fields and trying to avoid human hunter-killer squadrons. "General, we're receiving surrender requests from the 4th Fleet," reported Commander Vextal, her metallic voice carrying a tremor that would have been unthinkable days earlier. "They're completely surrounded by human vessels that appeared out of nowhere." Karthek's forearms gestured in frustrated dismissal. "Tell them to break through the encirclement. These humans can't have that many ships. Sir, the 4th Fleet reports no visible human vessels. Their sensors show empty space, but every time they attempt to move, their ships take kinetic impacts that disable their engines and weapon systems." The general's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "That's impossible. No cloaking technology can—" His words were cut off as the chamber's lights dimmed and emergency alerts began sounding throughout the facility. The massive defensive shields protecting the planetary surface flickered and died, leaving Valthak Prime exposed to orbital attack for the first time in centuries. "Shield generators are offline," shouted a technician from across the control room. "All primary power conduits have been severed simultaneously." Karthek spun toward the main tactical display, his four eyes taking in readings that defied comprehension. "How? We have the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy. The shield generators are buried 3 kilometers underground and protected by—" "General," Commander Vextal's voice was barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." The display shifted to show security feeds from the underground shield facilities. The images revealed teams of human soldiers moving through corridors that should have been impossible to access. They wore armor that seemed to bend light around them, making them nearly invisible even to direct observation. More disturbing was how they moved, flowing through the facility like water, anticipating every defensive measure as if they'd studied the blueprints for years. "They're inside our most secure installations," Karthek said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "How did they penetrate planetary defenses without triggering a single alarm?" "They didn't penetrate, sir," came a new voice from the chamber entrance. "We've been here for weeks." Every head in the room turned to see a figure in human combat armor standing in the doorway. The soldier's face was visible through a transparent faceplate, showing calm, professional features that somehow made the intrusion even more unsettling. "I am Captain Jessica Rodriguez, Terran Special Operations Command," the human announced. "General Karthek, you are under arrest for war crimes committed against human civilians at Kepler 442. Karthek's shock transformed into rage as his survival instincts kicked in. "Security! Kill this terrorist!" The chamber's automated defense systems activated, energy weapons emerging from concealed positions throughout the room. But as they swiveled toward the human intruder, nothing happened. The weapons were completely non-functional. "Your security systems use quantum processing cores," Captain Rodriguez explained conversationally. "Sophisticated technology, but vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses generated by modified human mining equipment. We disabled them 3 days ago." "Impossible," Karthek snarled. "This facility is impregnable. Even if you somehow infiltrated the surface, the underground levels are sealed behind blast doors that require molecular acid?" Rodriguez reached into a pouch on her armor and withdrew a small device. "Human mining operations deal with the hardest materials in the galaxy. We developed molecular acid for breaking down asteroid cores. It works quite well on hegemony blast doors." The general took a step backward, his metallic skin taking on the dark hue that indicated extreme stress. "What do you want?" "Justice," Rodriguez replied simply. "You ordered the orbital bombardment of civilian targets. Under human law, that makes you a war criminal. You're coming with me to stand trial." "Never." Karthek's primary arms reached for his sidearm, but the weapon wasn't there. He looked down in confusion, then back at the human soldier. "Removed it when we first arrived," Rodriguez explained, "along with everyone else's weapons. We've been monitoring this facility for 19 days, General. We know every corridor, every security protocol, every individual who works here." Commander Vextal found her voice. "How many of you are there?" "In this facility, just me." Rodriguez's smile was visible through her faceplate. Human Special Operations Doctrine emphasizes individual capability over force multiplication. One properly trained human operative can accomplish what other species require entire battalions to achieve. One soldier. Karthek's mandibles spread wide in disbelief. "You're claiming that a single human has compromised our most secure facility?" "Not just compromised," Rodriguez corrected. "Completely controlled. I've been directing your facility's operations for the past week. Every order you thought came from High Command actually originated from human intelligence analysis. We've been using your own communication networks to coordinate our planetary assault." The tactical displays around the chamber suddenly shifted to show the true scope of human operations on Velthak Prime. Dozens of military installations were marked in red, indicating human control. Government buildings, communication centers, even the planetary capital showed signs of infiltration. "This is what your intelligence services never understood about humans," Rodriguez continued, her voice taking on a lecturing tone. "We don't just study our enemies. We become our enemies. For months, human operatives have been living in your cities, working in your facilities, learning your customs and protocols. When your government declared human civilians to be acceptable casualties, you gave us the justification we needed to activate all of those sleeper agents simultaneously." "Sleeper agents," Bextal repeated. "You're saying there are humans throughout our society?" "There are humans throughout galactic society," Rodriguez corrected. "Every major government, every military installation, every strategic facility. We've been preparing for this possibility since we first encountered the galactic community. Your species' arrogance made it remarkably easy to infiltrate your organizations." Karthek was now backing toward what he thought was a secure exit, but Rodriguez made no move to stop him. "This is an act of war against the entire galactic community. The Council will do exactly what we want them to do," Rodriguez interrupted. "Because right now, human operatives are in position to simultaneously cripple the infrastructure of every major galactic power. We don't need to conquer your worlds, General. We just need to demonstrate that we can turn off your lights whenever we choose." The General's hand found the emergency communicator that should have connected him directly to High Command. He activated it frantically, but instead of the expected hegemony response, he heard a familiar human voice. "Hello, General. This is Admiral Chen. I trust Captain Rodriguez has explained the situation." "This is impossible," Karthek whispered. "Our communications are quantum encrypted, unhackable, by galactic standards," Chen's voice replied. "But humans developed quantum computing specifically to break encryption. It's what we do when someone tries to hide something from us. We find ways to uncover their secrets." Rodriguez checked a device on her wrist. "General, you have 30 seconds to decide. You can surrender voluntarily and face trial under human justice, which recognizes the possibility of rehabilitation, or you can resist and face the consequences of our military justice system." "Which doesn't?" "What consequences?" Karthek demanded. The lights in the chamber dimmed again, and when they returned, the room was full of human soldiers. They had appeared as if from nowhere, materializing from shadows and empty spaces like deadly ghosts. Humans learned camouflage from necessity, Rodriguez explained. "When you evolve on a world where everything is trying to kill you, you get very good at becoming invisible. These soldiers have been in this room for the entire conversation. You just couldn't see them." Karthek looked around at the human faces surrounding him, finally understanding the true scope of what his species had unleashed. These weren't the primitive savages described in hegemony intelligence reports. These were apex predators who had turned warfare into an art form. "I surrender," he said quietly. "Wise choice," Rodriguez replied. "Because the galaxy is about to learn what happens when you threaten human civilians. And, General," she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, "we're just getting started." The emergency session of the Galactic Council had devolved into chaos. Representatives from 47 species shouted over each other in dozens of languages, while holographic displays showed the systematic collapse of hegemony military power. "High Counselor," Thexani struggled to maintain order as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The humans have captured General Karthek and 6 other hegemony military commanders, announced Counselor Veshka, her melodic voice strained with tension. They're demanding immediate transport to human space for war crimes trials. This is madness, declared Ambassador Zexhai of the Crystal Dominion. No species has the right to abduct military officers of another sovereign government. They're not abducting war criminals, corrected Ambassador Cathara of the Observer Caste. They're executing arrest warrants issued under human law. It's actually quite sophisticated legal reasoning. Thexani's mandibles clicked in frustration. Human law has no authority over galactic affairs. Their claims of jurisdiction are based on the principle that attacks on civilians constitute universal crimes, interrupted a new voice. Every head in the chamber turned to see Ambassador Elena Vasquez entering through the main doors. Her diplomatic uniform was immaculate, her bearing confident and professional, but there was something different in her eyes. A hardness that hadn't been there during her last appearance before the council. Ambassador Vasquez, Thexani said carefully, I wasn't aware that humanity had requested permission to address the council. We didn't request permission, Elena replied, taking her position at the center of the chamber. We're here to deliver terms. Terms? Counselor Veshka's voice rose in pitch. You're hardly in a position to dictate terms to the entire galactic community. Elena smiled, and the expression sent chills through every representative in the chamber. Aren't we? Let me share some recent developments. She activated a portable holographic projector, and the air above the chamber filled with tactical displays showing military installations across dozens of star systems. Red indicators marked facilities that were offline, damaged, or under human control. The scope was staggering. In the past 72 hours, human forces have conducted simultaneous operations across 43 star systems, Elena explained. We've disabled or captured strategic assets belonging to 17 different species, all without firing a shot at civilian targets. Ambassador Zexhai stood abruptly, his crystalline body chiming with agitation. This is an act of war against the entire galactic community. No, Elena corrected calmly. This is a demonstration. You see, when humanity joined the galactic community, we made a disturbing discovery. Every species here has the same weakness. You've forgotten how to fight. She gestured to the displays, highlighting specific engagements. Your militaries are designed for ceremonial displays and policing actions against weak opponents. You've had peace for so long that you've lost the ability to conduct actual warfare. We have the largest combined fleet in galactic history, General Mordak protested. Our combined forces number in the tens of thousands. Your combined forces are currently paralyzed, Elena interrupted. Human special operations teams have been embedded in your command structures for months. Every major military decision has been observed, analyzed, and countered before it could be implemented. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. On the displays, more data appeared showing the infiltration of military installations, government facilities, and strategic infrastructure across the galaxy. How? Thexani asked quietly. Because humans don't think like you do, Elena explained. You see military conflict as a failure of diplomacy, something to be avoided at all costs. We see it as a continuation of politics by other means. You prepare for peace. We prepare for war. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. For the past decade, while you were debating our membership status and questioning our savage nature, we were studying your weaknesses. Every cultural exchange program placed human observers in your societies. Every joint military exercise taught us your tactical doctrines. Every diplomatic summit revealed your decision-making processes. Counselor Veshka found her voice. You're saying this was all planned? That humanity has been preparing to attack the galactic community since first contact? Not attack, Elena corrected. Defend. We knew that eventually someone would test our resolve. The Kepler massacre simply provided the justification we needed to demonstrate our capabilities. Ambassador Cathara stepped forward, her analytical mind working through the implications. You're not trying to conquer galactic civilization. You're trying to reshape it. Finally, someone understands, Elena acknowledged. Humans don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to exist in it without constantly being treated as second-class citizens or having our civilians murdered while bureaucrats debate proper procedures. And your terms? Thexani asked. Elena's expression became serious. First, the officers responsible for the Kepler massacre will stand trial under human law. Justice for 300,000 dead civilians is non-negotiable. Second, the Galactic Council will formally recognize humanity's right to self-defense, including preemptive action against threats to human civilians. Third, all anti-human discrimination policies will be immediately repealed. Humans will have equal representation in all galactic institutions. And fourth, Elena's voice dropped to a deadly whisper, any future attack on human civilians will be considered an act of war against Terra, with all the consequences that entails. General Mordak laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. And if we refuse, what can one species do against the combined might of the galactic community? Elena's smile returned sharp and predatory. Would you like a demonstration? Before anyone could respond, every display in the chamber went dark. Emergency lighting activated as the Council's main computer systems crashed simultaneously. When the lights returned moments later, the displays showed something that made several representatives recoil in horror. Live feeds from their homeworld showed human ships in orbit above every major galactic capital, not attacking, just present. A silent reminder of how thoroughly human forces had infiltrated galactic space. How many ships do you have? Thexani whispered. Enough, Elena replied simply. But more importantly, we have them positioned exactly where they need to be. While you were debating protocols and procedures, we were placing assets. Every major government, every strategic facility, every critical piece of infrastructure in the galaxy is currently within range of human weapons. She gestured to the displays showing orbital positions. These ships appeared simultaneously across 47 star systems. They've been there for weeks, cloaked and waiting. You just couldn't see them until we decided to reveal them. This is terrorism, accused Counselor Veshka. This is deterrence, Elena corrected. Every civilization in galactic history has eventually faced a choice: adapt to new realities or be destroyed by them. The age of humans being treated as amusing curiosities from a barbaric world is over. We're now a military power that demands respect. Ambassador Zexhai was trembling, his crystalline structure refracting light in patterns that indicated extreme stress. What guarantee do we have that humanity won't use these capabilities for conquest? Because conquest requires occupation, and occupation requires resources we'd rather spend on exploration and development, Elena replied. We don't want to rule your worlds. We just want you to remember that attacking humans has consequences. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives who had once dismissed humanity as irrelevant. The galaxy is changing. You can adapt to that change and benefit from human contributions to galactic civilization, or you can continue to see us as threats and face the consequences of that decision. The Council needs time to consider these terms, Thexani said carefully. You have 6 hours, Elena replied. After that, we'll assume you've chosen to continue the current state of hostilities, and we'll respond accordingly. As she turned to leave, Ambassador Cathara called out, Ambassador Vasquez, what happens to galactic civilization if we accept your terms? Elena paused at the chamber entrance, looking back with an expression that somehow combined predatory satisfaction with genuine hope. Then you'll discover what the galaxy looks like when humans are protecting it instead of being excluded from it. And I think you'll find that's a much safer place for everyone. The chamber doors sealed behind her, leaving 47 species to contemplate a new reality. The Deathworlders were no longer asking for acceptance. They were demanding it. The trial of General Karthek had become the most watched legal proceeding in galactic history. Representatives from dozens of species filled the observation galleries of the human tribunal ship, TFS Justice, while billions more followed the proceedings through live broadcasts across the galaxy. Judge Maria Santos, a distinguished veteran of the Terran colonial courts, presided over the proceedings with calm authority. Her experience in dealing with conflicts across human space had prepared her for complex legal challenges, but nothing quite like this. General Karthik, Judge Santos addressed the defendant, who sat in a specially designed restraint system that accommodated his four-armed physiology while ensuring security. You stand accused of ordering the deliberate targeting of civilian installations at Kepler 442, resulting in the deaths of 300,000 non-combatants. How do you plead? Karthik's metallic skin had taken on a dull gray hue that indicated resignation among his species. His legal representation consisted of both hegemony advocates and human defense attorneys, working together in an unprecedented collaboration. "I plead not guilty by reason of lawful military action," Karthek replied, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. The Kepler colony was established in territory rightfully belonging to the hegemony. The colonists were given adequate warning to evacuate. Prosecutor Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kim stepped forward, her uniform bearing the insignia of the Terran Military Justice Corps. "Your Honor, the prosecution will demonstrate that the defendant knowingly ordered attacks on clearly marked civilian targets, including schools, hospitals, and residential areas." She activated a holographic display that showed the orbital bombardment of Kepler 442 in devastating detail. The images of destruction were methodical, precise, and horrifying in their scope. "The evidence will show that General Karthek personally authorized targeting protocols that specifically aimed at maximizing civilian casualties," Kim continued. "This was not military action. It was genocide." Defense Attorney Commander Jackson Wright, a human military lawyer, rose to address the court. "Your Honor, while we do not dispute the tragic loss of life at Kepler 442, we must consider the context of established galactic law. The hegemony's actions, while regrettable, were conducted according to protocols that have been accepted by the Galactic Council for centuries." Judge Santos nodded thoughtfully. "This raises an important jurisdictional question. The defense argues that galactic law should supersede human law in this matter. The prosecution maintains that crimes against humanity fall under universal jurisdiction. Before we proceed with testimony, the court will hear expert witnesses on both legal frameworks." The first witness was Professor Elena Vasquez, former ambassador, and now serving as a legal scholar specializing in comparative galactic law. She had traded her diplomatic uniform for academic robes, but her presence commanded the same respect it had in the council chambers. "Professor Vasquez," Prosecutor Kim began, "please explain to the court the concept of universal jurisdiction as it applies to crimes against civilians." Elena stood with the same confidence she had shown during diplomatic negotiations. "Universal jurisdiction holds that certain crimes are so heinous that any court has the authority to prosecute them, regardless of where they occurred or the nationality of the perpetrators. The deliberate targeting of civilians has been recognized as such a crime by human legal systems for over 3 centuries. But is this principle recognized in galactic law?" asked Defense Attorney Wright. "Not explicitly," Elena admitted. "However, galactic law has never addressed the systematic extermination of civilian populations because such actions were considered unthinkable by civilized species." "Until now," Judge Santos observed. "Until now," Elena confirmed. The next witness called was Ambassador Kithara of the Observer Caste, appearing via holographic projection from the Galactic Council chambers. Her testimony provided crucial context about galactic military doctrine. "Ambassador Kithara," Prosecutor Kim continued, "in your analysis of galactic military conflicts, have you ever encountered precedent for the deliberate targeting of civilians?" "Never," Kithara replied without hesitation. "Galactic warfare, when it occurs, focuses on military targets and strategic assets. The concept of attacking civilian populations is alien to galactic military thinking. Then how do you explain the hegemony's actions at Kepler 442? Kithara paused, her analytical mind carefully considering the question. The hegemony treated human civilians as non-sentient obstacles rather than as people. This represents a fundamental failure to recognize human sapience and rights. Defense Attorney Wright stood. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is speculating about the defendant's mental state." "Sustained," Judge Santos ruled. "The witness will confine herself to observable facts." The trial continued for 3 days, with testimony from survivors of the Kepler massacre, military experts analyzing the attack patterns, and legal scholars debating jurisdictional questions. Throughout the proceedings, General Karthek remained largely silent, his 4 eyes focused on the evidence being presented against him. On the final day, Karthek himself took the stand. Judge Santos addressed him directly. "General, this is your opportunity to address the court. Do you wish to testify in your own defense?" Karthek slowly rose to his full height, his metallic frame catching the light from the courtroom's illumination. When he spoke, his voice carried a weariness that seemed to encompass his entire species. I have listened to 3 days of testimony about legal principles, jurisdictional authority, and military doctrine, he began, but I have not heard the one question that matters most. Why did I order the destruction of Kepler 442? The courtroom fell completely silent. Judge Santos leaned forward slightly. General, you may answer that question if you choose. I ordered the attack because I believed humans were not truly sentient, Karthek said, his words falling like stones into still water. For decades, hegemony intelligence reports described your species as clever animals, dangerous but not genuinely sapient. We saw your emotional responses as primitive programming, your attachment to civilians as herd instinct. He paused, his 4 eyes finally meeting Judge Santos's gaze. It was not until I was captured by Captain Rodriguez that I understood the truth. The planning, the coordination, the strategic thinking required for human military operations. No non-sentient species could accomplish such feats. Are you saying the hegemony was unaware of human intelligence? Prosecutor Kim asked. We were willfully ignorant, Karthik replied. We chose to believe intelligence reports that confirmed our prejudices rather than evidence that challenged them. It was easier to see humans as dangerous animals than to acknowledge them as equals. Defense Attorney Wright stood. Your Honor, this testimony demonstrates that my client acted based on flawed intelligence, not malicious intent. Intent is irrelevant, Judge Santos replied firmly. Ignorance of a victim's humanity is not a defense for genocide. She turned back to Karthek. General, do you understand the consequences of your actions? I understand that 300,000 sentient beings died because of my orders, Karthek said quietly. I understand that I am responsible for one of the most shameful acts in galactic history. And I understand that no punishment this court can impose will undo the harm I have caused. The courtroom remained silent for long moments before Judge Santos spoke again. General Karthek, this court finds you guilty of crimes against humanity. You will be sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 50 standard years. However, she continued, the court also recognizes your cooperation during this trial and your apparent genuine remorse. You will serve your sentence in a human rehabilitation facility, where you will have the opportunity to work with the families of your victims and contribute to efforts preventing future such tragedies. As the sentence was announced, the observation galleries erupted in discussion among the various species representatives. The precedent had been set. Attacks on civilians would be met with human justice. Regardless of the perpetrator's species or political affiliation, Ambassador Elena Vasquez watched from the diplomatic section as Karthek was led away. The trial was over, but its implications were just beginning to reshape galactic civilization. The age of humans being treated as second-class citizens had ended not with conquest, but with the establishment of law. Justice, it seemed, was a concept the galaxy was finally ready to understand. 6 months after the trial of General Karthek, the Galactic Council chambers bore little resemblance to the exclusive club that had once dismissed humanity as irrelevant. The pristine white walls now displayed holographic honor rolls listing human contributions to galactic civilization, while the circular seating arrangement had been expanded to accommodate Earth's full delegation. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the central podium, but this time she wore the insignia of the Council's new Director of Interspecies Security. The position had been created specifically to address the new realities of galactic politics, and no one had questioned humanity's right to fill it. The quarterly security report shows continued progress in reducing interspecies conflicts, Elena announced to the assembled representatives. Incidents of civilian targeting have dropped to 0 across all monitored systems. High Counselor Thexani, his once proud bearing now tempered by hard-learned respect, nodded approvingly. The establishment of the human protection protocols has indeed brought unprecedented stability to the galaxy. The protection protocols were deceptively simple. Any attack on civilians of any species would be treated as an attack on humanity itself, with all the military consequences that implied. The mere threat of human intervention had proven remarkably effective at preventing conflicts from escalating. However, Elena continued, we've identified new challenges that require our attention. The collective slave raids in the Outer Rim have resumed, and the Syndicate is reportedly developing biological weapons. Counselor Veshka of the Serene Coalition leaned forward. What does Human Command recommend? Elena smiled slightly at the title. In the months since the hegemony crisis, Human Command had become the informal name for Earth's military leadership, spoken with a mixture of respect and wariness by species across the galaxy. Admiral Chen's task force is already en route to the Outer Rim, Elena replied. As for the Syndicate, our intelligence assets are monitoring the situation. If they deploy biological weapons against civilian populations, they will face the full consequences of violating the protection protocols. Ambassador Cathara of the Observer Caste raised a question that had been troubling many in the galactic community. Director Vasquez, there are concerns among some species about humanity's growing influence in galactic affairs. How do we ensure that human power doesn't become human dominance? It was a fair question, and Elena had been expecting it. The human approach to galactic security is simple. We protect everyone or we protect no one. Our intervention forces include personnel from 17 different species. Our intelligence networks share information with all council members. We're not trying to rule the galaxy. We're trying to make it safe for everyone who lives in it. She gestured to the displays showing current military operations. Right now, human ships are escorting Zephyrian trade convoys, defending Mokari colonies from pirates and providing disaster relief to 3 different systems. We're not conquering, we're protecting. General Mordak, who had become an unlikely ally since witnessing human military efficiency firsthand, stood to address the chamber. The data supports Director Vasquez's claims. Human intervention has prevented at least 47 potential conflicts in the past 6 months. Their methods may be unconventional, but their results are undeniable. Unconventional had become the diplomatic term for human military doctrine. Other species were still struggling to understand how humans could coordinate complex operations without centralized command structures, or how they could infiltrate secure facilities without triggering any alarms. Speaking of unconventional methods, Thexani said carefully, there are reports that human operatives are still embedded throughout galactic infrastructure. Some species are concerned about the implications for their sovereignty. Elena's expression remained neutral, but there was a hint of steel in her voice. Human intelligence assets remain in position to protect against threats to civilian populations. They don't interfere with internal government operations unless those operations threaten non-combatants. And if they do, asked Ambassador Zexhai of the Crystal Dominion. Then we intervene, Elena replied simply. That's what the protection protocols mean. No government, no matter how powerful, has the right to slaughter civilians. We've made that very clear. The chamber fell quiet as representatives contemplated the new reality. Humanity had fundamentally altered the balance of galactic power, not through conquest but through the credible threat of intervention. The old system where stronger species could abuse weaker ones with impunity was gone forever. Councillor Veshka spoke again, her melodic voice carrying a note of curiosity. Director, there's something many of us have wondered about. Why did humanity choose protection over conquest? Your military capabilities could easily overwhelm any resistance. Elena considered the question carefully. It went to the heart of what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. Because conquest creates enemies, while protection creates allies, she finally replied. Humans learned long ago that the best way to ensure our own survival is to make sure everyone around us is also safe and prosperous. A stable galaxy is a galaxy where human civilians can live without fear. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that had once regarded humanity with suspicion and contempt. Besides, ruling the galaxy would be exhausting. We'd rather explore it. Admiral Sarah Chen's voice suddenly filled the chamber as she joined the session via holographic projection from her flagship. Director, we have a developing situation in the Kepler system. The Dominion fleet is moving toward human colonies with apparent hostile intent. The mood in the chamber shifted instantly. Every representative understood that this was a test of the new order. The Dominion Alliance had been quietly building their forces for months, apparently believing they could challenge human authority through superior numbers. Admiral, Elena said calmly, what's the composition of the Dominion force? Approximately 800 vessels, including their newest dreadnoughts. They're demanding that human colonies in the Kepler system be evacuated within 72 hours. Thexani looked confused, but the Kepler colonies are established under Treaty 15. The Dominion has no claim to that territory. They're testing us, Elena explained. The Dominion wants to see if humanity will back down when faced with overwhelming force. They think we won't risk a major war over a few colonial settlements. Admiral Chen's holographic image smiled grimly. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Human response fleet is already in position. We've been tracking their movements for weeks. How many ships do you have in the area? General Mordak asked. Enough, Chen replied, echoing the standard human response to questions about force strength. Elena turned to address the full council. This is exactly why the protection protocols exist. The Dominion is threatening human civilians, hoping we'll back down rather than fight. Instead, they're about to discover what happens when someone tests human resolve. Are you declaring war on the Dominion Alliance? Thexani asked. We're declaring that threats to human civilians will not be tolerated, Elena corrected. If the Dominion fleet withdraws, there will be no conflict. If they proceed with their attack, they'll face the consequences. Admiral Chen's projection flickered as she received new information. Director, the Dominion fleet has just been joined by ships from 3 other Alliance members. Total force strength is now over 1,500 vessels. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. 1,500 ships represented one of the largest military forces ever assembled in galactic history. No single species had ever faced such overwhelming numbers and survived. Elena remained calm. Admiral, initiate Operation Checkmate. Understood. All human assets execute checkmate protocols. The main display in the council chambers suddenly showed tactical feeds from the Kepler system. What the representatives saw defied comprehension. The massive Dominion fleet found itself surrounded by human vessels that had materialized from seemingly empty space. But more disturbing was the formation they had taken. The human ships weren't arranged in traditional battle lines. Instead, they had positioned themselves between the Dominion fleet and every possible escape route, while additional vessels appeared behind, above, and below the enemy formation. It was a perfect 3-dimensional encirclement that left no avenue for retreat. How many ships do you have out there? General Mordak whispered. More than enough, Admiral Chen replied. The Dominion made the same mistake everyone else makes. They counted our active fleet and assumed that represented our total capabilities. They didn't account for our reserve forces, our cloaked vessels, or our rapid deployment capabilities. Elena watched the tactical display with satisfaction. This is what humans call force multiplication. While other species build larger fleets, we build smarter fleets. Quality over quantity. Preparation over power. The Dominion Admiral's voice suddenly filled the chamber as his surrender transmission was broadcast. This is Admiral Thekvar of the Dominion fleet. We surrender. We had no idea that human forces were so extensive. They aren't, Elena said quietly, knowing that only the council could hear her. We have maybe 200 ships in that engagement. But they're demanding that human colonies in the Kepler system be evacuated within 72 hours. Thexani looked confused. But the Kepler colonies are established under Treaty 15. The Dominion has no claim to that territory. They're testing us, Elena explained. The Dominion wants to see if humanity will back down when faced with overwhelming force. They think we won't risk a major war over a few colonial settlements. Admiral Chen's holographic image smiled grimly. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Human response fleet is already in position. We've been tracking their movements for weeks. How many ships do you have in the area? General Mordak asked. Enough, Chen replied, echoing the standard human response to questions about force strength. Elena turned to address the full council. This is exactly why the protection protocols exist. The Dominion is threatening human civilians, hoping we'll back down rather than fight. Instead, they're about to discover what happens when someone tests human resolve. Are you declaring war on the Dominion Alliance? Thexani asked. We're declaring that threats to human civilians will not be tolerated, Elena corrected. If the Dominion fleet withdraws, there will be no conflict. If they proceed with their attack, they'll face the consequences. Admiral Chen's projection flickered as she received new information. Director, the Dominion fleet has just been joined by ships from 3 other Alliance members. Total force strength is now over 1,500 vessels. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. 1,500 ships represented one of the largest military forces ever assembled in galactic history. No single species had ever faced such overwhelming numbers and survived. Elena remained calm. Admiral, initiate Operation Checkmate. Understood. All human assets execute checkmate protocols. The main display in the council chambers suddenly showed tactical feeds from the Kepler system. What the representatives saw defied comprehension. The massive Dominion fleet found itself surrounded by human vessels that had materialized from seemingly empty space. But more disturbing was the formation they had taken. The human ships weren't arranged in traditional battle lines. Instead, they had positioned themselves between the Dominion fleet and every possible escape route, while additional vessels appeared behind, above, and below the enemy formation. It was a perfect three-dimensional encirclement that left no avenue for retreat. "How many ships do you have out there?" General Mordak whispered. "More than enough," Admiral Chen replied. "The Dominion made the same mistake everyone else makes. They counted our active fleet and assumed that represented our total capabilities. They didn't account for our reserve forces, our cloaked vessels, or our rapid deployment capabilities." Elena watched the tactical display with satisfaction. This is what humans call force multiplication. While other species build larger fleets, we build smarter fleets. Quality over quantity, preparation over power. The Dominion Admiral's voice suddenly filled the chamber as his surrender transmission was broadcast. "This is Admiral Thekvar of the Dominion fleet. We surrender. We had no idea that human forces were so extensive." "They aren't," Elena said quietly, knowing that only the Council could hear her. "We have maybe 200 ships in that engagement, but they're positioned perfectly, and the Dominion can't tell the difference between real ships and holographic projections until it's too late." The crisis ended without a shot being fired. The Dominion fleet withdrew in complete disorder, their military reputation shattered by the simple demonstration that humanity could outmaneuver any force, regardless of size. As the tactical displays faded, Elena looked around the council chambers one final time. The faces she saw reflected a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy, not as conquerors or rulers, but as guardians who ensured that strength never again triumphed over justice. "The galaxy is changing," Elena said softly. "For the first time in history, every species can live without fear of extinction at the hands of stronger neighbors. That's what humans brought to galactic civilization. Not more weapons, but the promise that weapons will only be used to protect the innocent." She smiled as she watched representatives from across the galaxy nod in agreement. The age of Deathworlders being dismissed as savage primitives was over. In its place had come something far more valuable. A galaxy where strength served justice and where the weak could sleep safely knowing that someone was watching over them. The moment when Deathworlders snapped had passed. What remained was a new age of peace, enforced by those who understood that true civilization meant protecting everyone, not just the strong.